non lo so dove ora vediamo.
Hello. If everybody would like to take a seat, we're going to begin shortly. Thank you very much. We're doing a second session, but so nice to see you. We always say we're going to go to
Yes,
visit.
which music is going? I'm going to. We were considering public now. Enrico ha disegnato Avenues, questa nuova scuola. Sì, è molto molto bella, bellissima, però ancora è little bit uncharted. Se Bianca entra in una... È veramente, cioè, il gruppo di lavoro è pazzesco, poi certo loro sono gli inibiti, cioè la mia.
Non scappare. Ah, è pinguino. I loved your input on snow in Central Park. It was very nice. Thank you. Come on. I read you with the
Il cane non è venuto per questo.
Scusami.
Questioni amministrative, burocratiche.
Dai, che ci sarà.
Bersani? Siamo lavati insieme qualcosa che non va bene. E quindi la storia del tempo che ci vogliono, no? È come era prima. Proprio misurato sulla realtà, cioè circolano ancora.
E comunque c'è anche il rapporto dell'IMF che è uscito, potete fatto da due economisti non italiani, quindi insomma noi abbiamo una serie di, ripeto, dobbiamo implementarle, però il messaggio secondo me deve essere corretto, abbiamo una serie di problemi.
Sì,
sono sicuramente realista, non riesco a vendere.
No, ma si tratta di essere
lei c'era all'inizio, no? Sono state dette un po' di cose.
No, ma diciamo che all'inizio forse loro hanno sbagliato perché hanno messo tanto come è difficile, cioè loro hanno le loro aziende sanno che l'Italia no, e allora lì forse dovevano evitare quel
insomma, se c'è uno per il quale è facile fare azienda in Italia è Conte. Se c'è uno per il quale è facile fare azienda perché la fa fuori d'Italia è Scaloni. Quindi cavolo utilmente, insomma, lo dico onestamente.
Beh, non dovete convincere me, no? Mi sto crocifiggendo per fare questa cosa.
Voglio essere sicuro di sedere dove si siede lei. Si siede nelle prime file, però non sul palco, vero? Ecco, sul palco. Allora venga con me che voglio... Sì, lo facciamo proprio lì. È la faccia strada?
Intanto noi andiamo dentro.
Grazie. Grazie, molto gentile. Grazie. Mi segue perché c'è molto fila. Grazie.
Tutto bene, piacere.
Mi dispiace tanto, sono rimasta male. Grazie, molto gentile. Grazie, mi segue pure.
Gianluca è candidato.
We're going to need one more chair on the, because we have another minister now up there. Ok? Vi hai capito?
Sì, ma chi?
A chi trovi lì? A Filippo allora.
To August.
Venga, venga.
Oh, guarda,
Bravo,
guarda,
bravo
guarda.
veramente.
Incrociare le racchette.
Alessandro per la vicina.
Italia, New
Ci
York.
siamo conosciuti, come sta?
Non la lascio neanche.
Ah sì, ho recuperato anche la carta d'identità.
Emiliano.
Ha chiamato Filippo adesso. Là.
C'è un microfono di là che il ministro ha lasciato dentro.
Il microfono.
Go see if the other one is in the room. Okay, she's getting it. Don't worry.
You
Don't
can
worry,
say
stay
that,
here.
Caro. I'm not gonna say. Not active. Buongiorno Presidente, welcome.
Sei lì io ho la sedia.
Brava. Aspettiamo che tutti. So, don't do that. I don't know yet. We'll find it as they come up here. We'll be able to hear. Seems like that's it. Yeah, it's less people than. So I think we can use these. Prendi una sedia. I'm learning it just as you are. No, invece sono meno questa volta.
I know, I hear the accent. I said, wow.
Here, I'm going to give these back to you now. The only thing is we could ask every... Hello. If everybody would...
No, sono accesi tutti e due.
Sì, però uno era più volume dell'altro. We ready? Hi, if everyone can please take their seats, please take your seats. Thank you. If everyone can please take your seats, se ci sediamo per favore perché cominciamo tra un minuto. If everyone can please sit down. Thank you very much. Grazie mille.
Sì, ora sì. Ci mette un po'.
With
The extra mic.
I don't think we may do a little Q&A in the afterwards. It isn't clear to me what we're supposed to. So I think we will. Medicine safety. So I'm assuming that we'll do it again. This time we're going to take Gideon's lead on who to give the microphone to.
Okay.
No, giovedì alla Sì, fammi sentire dopo. Ok, io sono qua fino...
Ladies and gentlemen, can everybody please take their seats so that we can get to our next panel? If everybody can please take their seats from the back so we can get moving. Thank you very much. My name is Gideon Rose. I'm the editor of Foreign Affairs, and welcome back to the second session of our conference, Italy Meets the United States, the inaugural summit. We have, in the first session, we had some of Italy's leading corporate leaders tell us about what they're doing and the challenges they face, and in effect, you might say, the demand for a better business environment and climate. And what we're going to be talking about this second panel is what you might call the supply of that climate and the larger political and financial situation affecting investment and economic performance in Italy. We have a spectacular panel. We have, of course, Prime Minister Amato, twice Prime Minister. We have Professor Vittorio Grilli, Ministry's Minister of Economy and Finance, and we have, of course, Ambassador Thorne, who we heard from earlier. So let's start a little bit. Professor Grilli, let's start with you. What has been done in the last couple of years? What steps have been taken to improve the business climate, to get the country on track, and what are the successes that people haven't yet fully appreciated?
Well, thank you. Listening to the previous panel, I think you all got a pretty good sense of the challenges that we are all facing, and we certainly have been working hard in trying to solve as many as we could. I think we have to put things in a little bit of perspective. Reading the moment right now is it's very complex, I think. It tends to be maybe oversimplified. I think the last 3 years have been, or 4, a time where different things came, to light, but they are really on a different time frame. Of course, the financial crisis brought to light that the way in which financial markets across the world were wired, was not exactly what they should have been. This brought in a huge economic crisis and sovereign debt crisis related to that. And that brought this huge issue which has 2 facets. One is a macroeconomic challenge, how to stabilize the economy in the short term, and so all the debate about monetary policy versus fiscal policy stance. But then I think investors that for many years didn't really did the homework in the sense of looking into the fabric of each country to really analyze deeply the factor of competitiveness that were really underneath each of them. Well, this crisis brought back them to see, well, I want to look into it. And when they start looking, not all countries really score very well. And my country was one of those that didn't score very well. But now, right now, however, people are confusing, I think, several times the macro problem of a short term, how to stabilize the economy, the economies, and longer term issue, which I think are the deeper one and the most difficult challenge in policy terms. Now, what have we been doing? I mean, first thing is, in the midst of a crisis, the major alarm on the markets and the economy was, is any country going to go bankrupt? That is the major issue. And so the first challenge that we had to reassure market that that was not the case, and certainly not Italy. Italy was and is a reliable debtor, and so we had to reestablish that concept. And therefore, the all major effort that we had to do when my government, Prime Minister Monti government, started was to reestablish Italy as, beyond any doubt, a trustworthy debtor. And so all the readjustment on our public finances were leading to that, to show that Italy didn't have any structural and serious problem in controlling its deficit and therefore its debt. And we took up the challenge by showing the world that we could put our public finances in not just a big primary surplus, but in a global zero deficit situation forever. And so what we did, and I know that that has had an impact on the short term on our economy, major changes in expenditure and taxation to achieve by this year, 2013, balanced budget. We changed the constitution as well so that we wanted to make sure that that was not just a temporary event to have the public finance in balance, but would have been a permanent feature of our economy. So now our constitution has been changed, so now balanced budget has been established as the rule for any future government as far as public finances equilibrium is concerned. Then, of course, that in Europe, and maybe we'll get back to that, there is a big debate about, well, too much discipline, fiscal discipline, too fast, was the right strategy. Our call was that for Italy, there was no alternative. We had to reestablish that concept, otherwise market will not have subscribed our sovereign debt any longer, and that would have been the end of the game. Now, that done, we had to go further and say, well, now we have to establish Italy not only as a trustworthy debtor, but also as an interesting place where to invest and do business. And that is clearly a different kind of challenge where, as the people in the previous panel has pointed to, really need a deep change in mentality of the country. It's not just setting different rules. You have to change really attitude of people. And my way of looking at it, which is not just Italy, but in a way large part of Europe, is that we came to realization of an underlying disequilibrium in our social and economic structure. Like post-World War II, 50s, 60s, 70s, our economy, Europe, was growing like Asia right now. You had the 6, 7, 8% growth. And it looked like that could basically last forever. And at that point, a lot of was a redesign of our, let's say, welfare system, entitlements, rules that were costly, we knew, but it looked like the economy could grow to sustain the cost of such large new welfare system. And maybe welfare system is not the right definition, is the role of the state in the economy. Now, at that point, when the 90s, the growth disappeared. And then you find yourself that you had an economy based on a very large public sector, supposed to provide a very large amount of services, but without the growth trends able to really pay for it. And I would add, not only that, but also, and it's my own belief, not only is somehow too costly to be dynamically supported by the growth that is not there any longer as it was in the past, but also has not the right incentive to generate growth in the country. So not only is it too costly, but it's also, in a sense, detrimental to growth. In a sense, my way of looking at it, when you want to provide, say, welfare system should, in a sense, have two roles. One, provide opportunities, and the other one, provide protection. And there are things for which you have to provide protection, but there are other things for which you have to provide opportunity, because opportunity is, to me, the best protection that you can have. And I think in a lot of Europe, this balance had been tilted. Not enough opportunity and too much quote-unquote protection that becomes not real protection when there is no more opportunities. So what we have been doing in the last year is to try to redesign the size and role of a public sector in the economy, and trying to slim it down and to provide much more room of maneuver from private activity. And now the list is long, but already was mentioned our final redesign of our pension system, which are very, very important things, which is not only important for really the expanding dynamics and for the stability of our public system and our public finance in the long term, but also to provide the right incentive for labor participation in our economy. And of course, then labor participation is not clearly just not only about pension system, but is about rules of the game in the labor market. And there we intervene in two ways, and I think people and market have been focusing much more on the first stage, which was the market reform of last spring, but was not only that. That part was to tackle, in my own reading, a major issue, that our market, labor market, was not only not flexible enough, but also segmented in a very devastating way, where you had insider and outsiders, and the insider and the outsider were, in a sense, the wrong categories. You had a huge discrimination against young workers, females and young workers. And it's very hard to provide a credible growth story when you cannot demonstrate that young people can enter the labor market and being really the factor of growth for the next few years. I mean, growth can only come from the new generation, not from the old generation. So, and here we wanted to take away that segmentation, which basically was, we basically made our country like a huge LIFO system in the labor market. Last in, first out, which were always the young people. Older adult male especially had permanent contracts, and younger people had very short-term contracts. Which mean that a company didn't have an incentive to invest on young people, and because they knew they were the first one they had to dismiss in case they needed to shut down labor. So that part of a labor reform was to try to create a level playing field for all workers and increase the ability of flexibility of hiring people and firing people. But that was not enough. That is the framework. But then in November, and I will end with that, we sort of switched gear, and we said, and we challenged labor union and the employer organization, saying, well, to create really growth and jobs is very important to have a right labor labor legislation framework. But it's also very important how you have private negotiation between companies and labor union. Basically, it's very important what you do with your contracts, labor contracts. And we challenge them really to change and evolve in their contractual negotiation on two levels. First, to introduce much more flexibility in the use of labor within the company. Second, to make productivity a much more important driver of wage dynamics. So we said, well, you go back, negotiate with each other, and if you come back with a credible new set of contractual arrangements where you have much more flexibility in company utilization of labor, and if you have a clear link between wages and productivity where we put money on the table. And so that's what happened. And so in our last budget in December, we put money to have that part of wage which is linked to productivity tax-free, basically. So that's what we introduced, a de-tax policy for that kind. Of course, that was not the only thing that we did. The other part, as I said, was slimming down the public administration, that for me is one of the major obstacles for a real entrepreneurial environment, because too much space is taken by government, not only in public service activity, but also in business activity. A huge part of the service sector, which is so underdeveloped in Italy, which is in fact usually the driver for advanced economy, has been quote unquote taken over by the public administration. We have about 7,000, we counted 7,000 companies owned by the public administration, which are doing business in the service sector. And many of them have this very nice setup where, because they are owned 100% by the public administration, when the public administration is in need to acquire services, they don't need to have a public tender. They just use the in-house company, destroying completely the market for real private companies. So what we did now is changing the rule as well, forcing this publicly owned company to revise their business plans, because we took away this possibility of not doing public tendering. Now, everything has to be public tender. And so either your company is very efficient and up to date, or it's going to go out of the market. So this other idea of reducing the size of the public sector is fundamental, because we said before, Italian economy has all the good ingredients, I think, and we already talk about our company, which are export-led, and those are doing very well. Then we have other sector of company which are instead domestic, where the market is typically domestic, but unfortunately a lot of them depend as a prior client from the public administration. So, and that is an unhealthy thing to do. We have to generate a market which is independent of the public administration when they can thrive. And that is a challenge that will have to be pursued in the next months and years.
Okay, let's turn to President D'Amato. Italy is going to have an election in 2 weeks. What's going to happen, and will the reforms continue?
Of course, the reforms will continue, but not only ours. One of the points that I want to stress is that Italy shares some of its main difficulties with other European countries, members of the Eurozone. And all of us have the problem that is now clear to almost everybody, that without tools, instruments of government at the European level, there are policies that cannot be pursued and are badly needed. So this is something that will be a substantial part of our agenda in the next couple of years. But let me begin from my, let's say, initial view of my country. Something that you might find striking is that there are several Italian companies that are doing wonderfully, and they have gained more money in the last couple of years than they ever did in the past. And these are the main Italian exporting companies that have also changed the profile, if you want, of Italian exports. Everybody knows that not only fashion, not only cars, Ferrari, but also equipment, but also machineries, but also capital goods, that we export not only into our traditional, let's say, in US, European countries, but increasingly into emerging economies that really need our intermediate goods that are excellent. And the Italians who are engaged in this kind of activities are doing well. And they haven't even resented the big crisis, also because they can provide the money they need by using other channels. So the question is, if they succeed in doing it, why aren't the others doing the same? Why we speak correctly of a total productivity of Italy that has fallen down in these latest years, while some of our medium, not big national champions are doing so well? Quite likely because there are general difficulties that are enough to limit the activities, the productivity, the expansion of most of our companies. And this is quite clear. Most of our companies are too small to profit somehow of the opportunities of the global markets, and one of the Italian specific problems is how to cope with these companies. The example is very simple. As perhaps most of you know, our public administrations have not been paying their suppliers or several things for months and months. This creates a problem. Certainly it does create a problem also to Enel. But when it creates problem to me, a small Italian entrepreneur, I might go bankrupt for this reason, because I don't have other possible suppliers of money. My bank is in great difficulty nowadays, credit crunch, etc. And if I don't receive that money from that branch of the administration, I can't buy the raw materials that I need to continue my production, and therefore I lose my clients, and therefore I fail. So this is a common kind of history in Italy recently that is typical of a level of business that is too small and too low to overcome this kind of difficulties. So one of the Italian structural problems is the size of so many of its small companies, which also depend on domestic demand much more than on the global market, and therefore the recession that we are going through in these months is something that has quite a negative impact on them. It takes time to solve a problem like this. The immediate need is to restore for these small Italian companies the supply of financial resources. And I'm not so pessimistic on this now, because due in this case to the first steps of the banking union at the European level, the interbanking market that is moving again, little by little, credit will go back where it was. It will take time, but the latest figures that I have are quite clear in indicating that in the last quarter of last year and at the beginning of this year, finding money is not easy, but is something that may happen, which you couldn't say until a few months ago. Another Italian, but not only Italian problem is demography. How can a country where my generation is becoming majoritarian, my generation, I mean, not my only generation, but let's say the over 65, I'm already 75, so I'm beyond that threshold, but are so, let's say, heavy in our demographic structure. People tend to compare the happy years of the Italian miracle when we were so productive in the 50s and in the 60s with the current times and say, why aren't we so productive as we were in those years? Well, it's very simple, because we were much younger. Because consider, I'm not an economist, and therefore, which is an advantage, Victoria. Well, which is an advantage, because I'm reading that if you are on one doctrinal side, you can only say that supply side reforms are needed, nothing on the side of demand. If you say that let's say, fostering a little bit demand might be useful. You are Keynesian, and therefore you can't be taken seriously. Not being an economist, I can say both things, and I don't find any inconsistency in finding both of them quite reasonable. More domestic demand, more supply-side reforms. Why not? Why not? It might work. But I'm not an economist, and therefore I think that there is something which is absolutely important for any economy, the rate of energy that people can devote to their activities. Flexible, not flexible, technological, not the rate of energy. Now, the rate of energy of people in their 20s or 30s is much higher than the rate of energies of my generations. And nowadays, Italy is dominated by the older generations. And therefore, the rate of energy has gone down. You see, when they, but not only they, I did it myself, reduce the turnover in the public sector just to save money. When I was at the Interior some years ago, one of my main, let's say, reasons of anxiety was looking at my policemen trying to reach these young people creating problems in demonstrations. My policemen were in their 40s or in their 50s. And the young guys were under 20. And they ran much faster. And my poor policemen were trying to reach them. But I mean, the rate of energy in the Italian police is lower than it was years ago for this very simple reason. Demography is a very important factor in changing things. So it has to do with productivity, and the only remedy at the moment would be to be more American on immigration. More American on immigration. Because, if you don't produce children on your own, you'd better have children coming from somewhere else and increase the rate of energy of your economy. So this is something that, in my view, in the next years will be considered. Demography also affects your welfare system, and pointless to say. We share these problems with several others. Medicare might go bankrupt in 10 years if a reform is not adopted here. We might have similar problems. I was reading a research which is really frightening on the expected rate of people affected by Alzheimer in the next years, because we tend to live over 80, 82, 83, etc., which is the age when Alzheimer might hit more easily. A research that is being conducted now in Italy has assessed already in Tuscany, only Tuscany, 45,000 women and 25,000 males affected by Alzheimer. The cost of each of them in terms of sanitary protection and assistance is €100,000 per year. So, either, as we said years ago, we unplug the elderlies, me included, or I don't know what kind of solutions we are going to find. My final point goes back to this European problem. Really, what happened 3 days ago in Brussels was, in my view, if not a disaster, close to it. I appreciate the fact that our government succeeded in saving some money for useful programs in Italy, but I don't appreciate the fact that having adopted all of us austerity in our national budgets, we don't use the European level for countervailing measures in terms of growth. This is really a sort of collective running toward a disaster. The disaster is not with us now already, but this is a general European problem. It's not an Italian problem that is affecting Germany as well, because of course their economy as well is going down. And you can't use austerity at the national level and austerity at the supranational level. It doesn't make any sense at all. Austerity is sound, is essential, as long as it is accompanied by stimulus onto the economy. This stimulus cannot come from our national budgets. They rightly refuse to do it, because you can't do both things with the same budget. If it is austerity there, it has to be austerity there. But at that point, if the Europeans still care about their future, they should use their supranational level of government much better than they are doing. Europe is now changing. There might be a different balance of power politically in Germany. There might be in Italy. And in the future European Council and in the future balance among our countries, I expect this crucial problem, much more than red tape, to be solved in the incoming future.
Let me press you on that for a little bit. You're an experienced Italian politician, among other things. What is your take on the election that's coming up?
Well, let's say I could say I feel satisfied at the moment, and you might ask me, are you crazy? Why are you saying you have nothing to be satisfied for? No, because months ago, let's say a year ago, I had a European situation in which the financial crisis was far from being solved, and the financial market was really fragile and unstable, and people were asking, will the euro survive, will Greece, will Spain, etc. A year afterwards, now, this is somehow settled, because what they have done on the one side, what the European Central Bank has done on the other side, has stabilized the euro and the Eurozone. Not forever, because you can't say forever. Politically, a year ago, there was a bunch of excellent people called upon by the President of the Republic to run the country without a political majority, substantially, because all of the parties were forced to give their votes to this government in order for the country to continue. But will there be a political majority for the future? This was the question months ago, and we didn't have an answer. Now we can quite reasonably rely on the fact that there will be a center-left majority, which in my view is the best political setting that we might rely upon for the next years, because what remains is a center-right, which is, let's say, preaching policies that are quite destabilizing. But the forecast, the reasonable forecast that we might make now is that that part will remain at the opposition.
I think I know how you would characterize my glass. Ambassador Thorne.
No, it's this one, you see.
I think I want to take some water.
2/3, 1/3.
So, Ambassador Thorne, what's your take on, what's the United States take on, not so much on the elections, but on what's been done and what needs to be done?
You know, frankly, generally very positive. I mean, without doubt. I don't know if this thing's working or not, but
I'm not sure it works.
Can you hear me, Giuliano?
Yes, of course, I'm close to you.
That's what I wanted to make sure. I wanted to make sure you, of all people. No, you know, this technocratic government, that Monti government, that came in to really deal with what was a really serious problem, a serious crisis that was very dangerous, actually. Really took the challenge of initiating a reform process in Italy, and you know, lots of criticisms can be laid on not enough, not right, whatever. But you know, at least from our point of view, it's the first serious reform effort that was taken by an Italian government in quite some time, at an absolutely critical time. It was done by in an intelligent way, in as thoughtful a way as could possibly be done, and it just to give credit where credit's due, the political parties supported that process, even though for some elements and some parts of it, you know, it was a hard swallow. That, as far as the U.S. government is concerned, has greatly enhanced the sense of Italy's sense of purpose and Italy's sense of being able to meet the economic challenges that it is faced with. Okay. Is that better? I don't think that's better. I am speaking to it. Can you hear me? There it is.
We can hear you, and the whole world can hear you.
Yeah, and that's what I'm afraid of. So you know, I think that that has been extremely important. I mean, the observations that we would also make is that, from our point of view on this side of the Atlantic, is that you know, reform is not built in a day, adopting a phrase, and you know, this is going to take. It takes more than 12 months or 13 months or 14 months to really affect the profound changes, which I think the Italian political processes has to go through, and it's got to continue. And we're hoping and believing that the Italian reform process will continue. President Napolitano is coming over this week, and we certainly want to endorse the progress that Italy has made and encourage it to continue. And we like to believe that it will. The other concern has been, you know, could a new government come in and reverse the processes that have been taken already? And actually fairly satisfied that, in fact, the changes that have been made are permanent, that they can't be reversed because they're kind of part of the bureaucracy right now, which I think is also reassuring. I don't want to comment too much about the election. It seems that there will be a center-left government. The concerning part from our point of view is, will it be strong enough to continue to push through reform? And you know, it's not easy. I mean, there's been, over the last year, there was this alignment between the political parties, and you have the decretos, and you had the you know, the affirmation, if you will, of the parliament to enact that reform, to make that reform. And now we're going to be more involved with the new government and an electoral process, and you need a strong enough majority to be able to push through the things that a lot of people might not agree with. So that the worst thing that would be, is the government going to last? Is the new government going to last? And that's a question mark that we have in our mind from here. We hope that it will be, and I think the formation of this new government after the election will be crucial to that process. I mean, in terms of Italy's where it is in the world, I mean, Italy is facing a lot of challenges. I don't know if you all know. I mean, I grew up in Italy as a boy in the 50s and 60s. My father was an administrator of the Marshall Plan. I remember those times. I remember the sense of optimism, hard work, people coming in from the Paese into the cities to find work, to buy their first Cinquecento, and all those kinds of things. And it was a heady time, and there wasn't a social safety net in those days. People just were working hard, and then the social safety net, came in with the revolutions of the 68, and then added all this expense to life, and then the growth, as it would be inevitable, the growth couldn't be maintained, but the cost structure was maintained, and so you began to accumulate debt. Look, we have the same problem, and we are all faced with challenges of entitlement programs, and to some degree, Italy more than us, aging populations that we're going to have to deal with, have successful immigration policies to reinvigorate our workforce, things like that are going to be hard to change. I do think, from our point of view, from the U.S., that the strength of the European Union and the adherence and the meshing of the European countries into a stronger union is vital for all of the European countries, I think, to be competitive on the world stage. We're all struggling with globalization. We are in the United States. It's a challenge. There are growing economies, as there should be, all over the world that are challenging, things we used to take for granted. It's destabilizing everything we do. So we're trying to find ways in the United States to meet those challenges. Italy is going to, along with other countries, whether it's Germany or wherever else, to be competitive. But stronger leadership in the European Union and stronger adherence by all the European countries, we feel anyway, is an absolutely essential part of the future opportunities of the European nations. We have a new Secretary of State that I mentioned before. I mean, he's a guy that also grew up in Europe and is also very much wants to encourage and help the transatlantic partnership as much as possible, and we're completely dedicated to that. I think Italy's got a challenge on the backbone of its country, small and medium enterprises. How do they cope with globalization? How are they going to deal with, finding new markets? Because obviously, well, right now it's a particularly difficult time. The consumer market in Italy has crumbled. But, how does a small enterprise that doesn't have enough money find people outside of Italy to sell things to? And I think the digital economy is the use of digital technologies and means is essential for those small companies to perhaps find greater markets for themselves. Anyway, those are some random thoughts.
Thank you very much. That's fantastic. Let's get you guys in. We only have a few minutes left, but we are going to wrap up at 11:30 since some of our participants have flights to catch and so forth. So let's take a couple of questions, actually, here and here. So let's take two. Wait for the microphone, identify yourself, and ask a quick, concise question, and we'll get some.
Hi, Jeffrey Laurenti with the Century Foundation. Italy is the one EU powerhouse country that's directly on the front line facing the turbulent North Africa and Middle East area. To what extent, besides the massive investments in energy, does Italy have economic as well as political links with that region? Given that that region is in some ways like Italy's own south in terms of being underperforming, and how much does Italy drive the larger EU agenda towards that region, and is it an agenda in competition with the United States economically as politically?
And let's bundle the question right behind it too as well.
I'm Anthony Manera again from JPP Euro Securities. I'm just trying to get a handle on, for perhaps the ambassador can help me here. How do I convince an American money manager to want to invest in an Italian company, either through private equity, bonds, any issuance that we could come up with? Right now, it just seems like even Prime Minister D'Amato was saying there are a few Italian companies in the middle market. They're doing well. We seem to be able to unblock it. A lot of those middle market companies are also producing in Romania, Bosnia, other countries, and having success. So they're exporting. They're not really in Italy producing their goods, some of them. So we have to find some way of unblocking this notion and creating, again, the equity culture in the companies, to have them adopt English, adopt the way of getting capital, because the banks are no longer lending. And I don't agree with Prime Minister D'Amato saying, well, credit is coming back.
Why don't you drop the D?
Amato, I'm sorry. The credit's coming back. And I don't think that, banks basically own small companies and don't permit them to grow. So the risks are that they have to continue to go to the markets, understand the culture, get the capital, and take on the responsibilities themselves instead of getting convoluted inside the Italian financial system the way they've been for a long time.
Thank you. So Italy in North Africa and the region, and how do you convince American managers and investors to invest in Italy? Who wants to take either of those?
You go like...
No, well, knowing Italy better than, in my view, you do, because it's not true that banks own small companies. Actually, one of the problems of the small companies is that they are family companies, and frequently their future is at stake because the second or the third generation is not interested in the business that their father started off. So the problem is precisely allowing them to grow and to enter the market. I was looking recently, a few days ago, at the figures on financial operations in Italy, and something that I found encouraging was that the traditional loan, that was the main operation, in 2012 was obviously reduced, but also because there was a growth of other financial activities, mostly linked to equity. This is quite interesting, and I can let you give a look at this figure. It's please don't say that the successful Italian companies are actually based in Romania and are using the lower costs they find there. The best Italian companies are based in Italy, not in Romania, as you know, and that kind of trend is somehow declining now, looking for lower costs in Eastern Europe. The problem of North Africa is really a crucial problem. At the moment, he might know more than I do whether Italy is playing at the European level a leading role. I'm well aware that one of the areas where we can cooperate more easily and more fruitfully is precisely energy, and there are huge projects in this area that should somehow be carried out in the next future. Since I love the truth on Italian companies, but also on the role of my country in North Africa, I don't think that Italy is playing at the moment the role it should. We have so many links. We have Libya, we have Tunisia, we have both in Libya, Algeria, etc. So we should do much more and not leave the relationships in the hands of our oil company, which is doing its best, but it's not enough. I hope that the problem will be perceived in all its political size, because what is happening now in the three countries of the spring that has not become a summer, Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya is really frightening in my view, and it requires a great political attention, a much greater political attention, both by Italy and by the European Union as such.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Northern Africa, I think is a crucial area for Italy. First of all, because of a problem we mentioned before, the South. And my own view is that the economy of southern Italy depends crucially on the development on the southern Mediterranean. And I think if we could have in the future a success story for North Africa, that will make the problem of southern Italy much, much more simple. I mean, I couldn't see like Europe just being all developed up to, you know, Naples, and then Northern Africa being well developed, and then just a little piece, you know. I think the fact that this, the proximity and the natural projection of the south of Italy toward Africa, and the lack of a successful growth there is part of the not successful story of South of Italy. So we have a really strategic problem, which also goes together with the immigration policy, you know, because now is not really is a policy of emergency and control. Is not a well structured and strategic policy of how to somehow change the demographic dynamics in our country. Are we doing? Are we playing an important role? I frankly think so within the European community. Simply find there are two blocks in Europe: the one that looks east and the one that looks south. In Italy, we look both ways because we are really in intersection. But our interest on the south is very strong, and so within the European budget, but also with the two financial institutions that we have in Europe, the European Investment Bank and then the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, that was born really for the Eastern Europe. But now the way in which we have been supporting the new management was on a clear mandate that much more attention will be given to the south of the Mediterranean. Now on how to convince foreign investor and the equity culture, I think it is a moment of an important transition for two reasons. One is, I mean, the small company story for Italy, which has been really our success story, as was said before, is not going to be our success story any longer. Now, I think everyone understands that to me, the small company had such a development in Italy because it was like a comfort zone. You know, below a certain size, like certain rigidities in the market would not apply to you. But now, being sort of in that comfort zone, it basically cuts you off from the markets, the real markets. Because if you are too small, you don't have the sufficient size to access faraway market. You don't have a sufficient size to invest really in research and development. So that comfort zone has become a discomfort zone. So I think that one reason they very well understand that in order to survive, they have to take the bet of growing. Second is banking. And I think this crisis has shown that the lack of strategic funding model for a lot of Italian companies cannot last. You know, in the past, a lot of Italian companies, smaller, medium and small size, were cash rich. They didn't really need to have a good strategy about how to go and get funds. They were basically self-financed, and when they need money, they would go to a bank, you know, and that was always the money. Now that is not, that has changed a lot. So I think that companies understand that rely on banks when they really need it is not a good choice. It has to be one of the choices. And so I think that a lot of them right now are reevaluating and looking at how to access the market directly, either equity or debt market. So, and a lot have been doing it. And so I think this is a good time because the mentality of entrepreneur in Italy is changing. And so I think you will find much more fertile grounds for that switch in strategy.
Ambassador, you want to have the last word on that?
Okay, just not much on North Africa, except in a geopolitical sense. I mean, Italy is really affirmed its role and position as a crucial ally of ours in trying to, in conducting a war there, actually, but also in the aftermath of that. They are the country that is most knowledgeable and has most historical ties with Egypt and Tunisia and Libya that is really critical to us, so that and critical to our interest in trying to find stability in that region. And you know, the more Italy could have, they've got little enterprises all through those countries and have had for you know, years. The more that they could have, they could push their development into that and into that area, and you know, bring development back in that area will help enormously to you know, our interest of trying to find a stability in the new North Africa post-spring. So you know, that's I just want to make that comment. Not to be underestimated, Italy has been enormously helpful to us in ways other than just strictly business in that area. You know, in terms of business, I'm cautiously optimistic about the reforms, the reform process, the transition of this country from, as you say, from the SME dominated and reliant country to one that is more, you know, financial market oriented in that sense. I think that I see it in a lot of the people I've talked with. They've had it good, you know, lots of money in the bank, and so they don't even do what we do, which is to, you know, go borrow the money or find investors or all that kind of stuff. Haven't had to, but now they're going to have to, and I think that realization is really dawning. The challenge, I think, for an outside investor, and I think it is a good time to really start looking at Italian opportunities. It's not as bad as you think, but the judicial reform is the thing that I hear mostly from the from outside investors. I mean, you've got to have contracts honored. You've got to be able to seek redress and find it in 6 months and not 4 years. Those kinds of things Italy's got to deal with if to really attract outside, you know, in sizably more amounts than they have till now. They've got to make they've got to get the judicial system to support business growth, and you know, it's challenging because you know, the judicial system is pretty tough, I think, there. But given some progress on that front, and given awareness in terms of the entrepreneurs that
we've got to go about our business a different way. I think Italy's poised for creating some real opportunities.
There's so much more we could discuss, but we want to leave something for next year's conference. We invite you all back. President Amato, Minister Grilli, Ambassador Thorne, thank you. Thank all of you for participating. Thank you, Fernando Napolitano. Next year.